It's my honor and privilege to introduce to you our keynote speaker for the day, Pastor Joe Champion. Pastor Joe pastors a small little church in Austin, Texas, where everybody's conservative, everybody loves Jesus. It's the heart of the Bible Belt. It's that place where it would be very difficult to grow a church. I'm being very facetious here. Austin, Texas is the most liberal city in the South, and they've gone down there, dug it out of the rock. They pastor a church that's now running several thousand members. They're in multiple locations, actually launching a new location. He's going to tell you a little bit more about that here in just a minute. I met Joe several years ago while we were at Gateway Church, invited him to come up and speak to our men, and then we've had him at conferences, and he's spoken at Gateway Church, and just a tremendous pastor, loves pastors, part of the ARC lead team, Association of Related Churches, where we partner with them to help our church planners be effective in planting churches. And so I want you to give it up today for my good friend, Pastor Joe Champion.
Pastor Bobby, man. That's for you right there. Have a seat, everybody. We were sad when he decided to move back to Michigan. Texas has not been the same. And we are dear friends, and Rose and the family, it's just an honor to be with you. And thank you for having me. I've been aware of this church for many, many years and the movement with LINC. And it's been one of my bucket lists to get up here and to be a part of this ministry. And, of course, Pastor Dwayne and his wife, you guys are legends. That doesn't mean you're old, but you're a legend. And I guess that does go with living longer than anybody else maybe in the room. How many know that Dwayne's going to have some counseling for his marriage after some of the things he said this morning? You know, he didn't age. The amazing thing is, he goes, let me just tell you, they're not going to look as good. She's not going to be this. She's not going to be that. And he hasn't aged I was going to say a drop, but you're going to be in big trouble. So anyway, with that, I'm learning how to talk with these. I have Invisalign. Let me just tell you why I'm doing it. I have a doctor, a dentist, who says, hey, I'll straighten them for free. Anything for free. You can put in my mouth. You can do anything you want. So I said, go ahead, do it. So I'm learning how to talk and leave these things in and all that kind of stuff. I also have a doctor that's, he's a plastic surgeon. And so he said, hey, if you ever want me to do anything, just let me know. Now, I'll have to charge you a little bit, some of the devices and some of the staff I gotta pay. And I said, sure. And so I said, there's only one thing I want. I want liposuction. And he goes, oh, yeah, we'll do that. I said, I want all of this off. And he goes, yeah, when I take them off, they'll never come back. Now, if it does come back, it may not come back there, but it's going to come back somewhere, right? So I called and said, well, how much are you talking about? Oh, he goes, I don't know. I think I can do it. It's usually whatever thousands of dollars per section, he goes, but, about 5 or 6. And so I'm thinking, okay, $500 or $600. So I go down there and spend about an hour and a half with the team. And he goes, okay, Joe, we're going to go ahead and set this up for tomorrow. He goes, we're gonna take all this out and give you abs. I mean, in 12 hours. This is the greatest thing that you could ever have for me. And so he goes, hand me your credit card. My girls will process it. And I said, sure. And so swipe it and here, sign here. And it was $11,000. Now I'm like, we spent an hour and a half with the team. They're measuring. You're in front of people, love handles, like, oh, God, we need to take these off and all that kind of stuff. And they ran their credit card, so now I don't want to back out. This is a doctor in our church. I got to go with it. And so I'm on my way home, and Lori says, well, what are they going to do? I said, tomorrow. She goes, well, how much is it? I said, it's 11. 11 what? I said, it's only 11,000. She goes, and you said no, right? I said, no, Lori, I'm too embarrassed. Can't back out now. You got to go with it. She goes, turn your butt around or call him right now. We're not spending 11, you're not living that long. And number two, it won't make you look that much better anyway. So I had to call, and she said, well, what happened? What I did not realize is there's like 18 sections. Like, and so I said, Doc, hey, I forgot that we're going on vacation tomorrow. Hey, if you don't mind, can I just, and really we were, I said, can I get that credited back to the card? And I said, when I get back, hey, I'd like to take care of it then. He goes, oh yeah, no problem. That was 3 years ago. And he was sitting on the front row this past Sunday. I know every time he's probably thinking, when is that guy going to finally, but I'm not doing it for $11,000. But I will do anything for free, like these teeth. Hey, I got a new pulpit. So as Pastor Bobby was talking about Texas, and it's all conservative, and of course it's guns, it's men and cowboys and Indians. Here's the new pulpit. I think we might have a picture that could be loaded if you guys tell me, is it up there? There it is. Actually, that's not my pulpit. That is a pulpit that Phil Cook, how many know who Phil Cook is? Of course, Phil from LA. He just sent this picture to me, literally. He said, Joe, I found your pulpit in Texas. And those are missile shells holding up the pulpit. How many would like that kind of pulpit right there? Like, you would like to bring that out every so often. That's the president of the Philippines podium when he speaks. And so no insecurity there. Anyway, a little bit about myself, and just our story is my wife and I, we've been married 28 years, and 27 and a half of those we have been in ministry together. Lori is fifth generation PK, both sides of her family, everybody's saved. Her father actually, at the age of 45, she watched die of a heart attack Palm Sunday, 1988. And it was obviously a tragic day, but fast forward, her mother remarried a missionary from Costa Rica who lost his wife in a car accident, and they lead a wonderful church when they left Costa Rica in Seguin, Texas. The oldest brother is now the pastor, was on staff with us for 13 years and now pastors his own church. And then the youngest brother, Matt, pastors in Alabama. And then Lori and I have been doing ministry. And so she comes out of rich heritage of ministry. And then my family, my dad, my mom are heathens. Nobody's saved. And that's why God put Lori and I together. We both went to LSU. I played football at LSU. It was while playing ball there, I came into really an encounter with Christ my junior year. And then Lori and I would meet. And then we would get married in 90 and just really basically go right into ministry together. And serving together, serving alongside each other. And then in 2000, as we had been pastoring for 10 years, we began to sense that God was getting ready to do something with us. We were traveling full-time out of Baton Rouge and actually also helping co-pastor a church. And then on a Sunday morning, it comes like this. During worship, just like we were this morning, this phrase, "It is Austin." And it was so real, so alive. It was, without a question, it was the voice of God for me. And I immediately, after the service, I was preaching at that church. I called Lori at home. She was with our newborn baby at the time, who's now 18. And I said, Lori, I think we got clearance to land. And I use that phrase because even as Pastor Dwayne was preaching this morning, that some decisions we make, some things we do in the ministry, we decide to land when God said, I didn't clear you to land. I didn't give you permission to drop it there. I didn't tell you. Now, thank God for grace and thank God for redemption and his ability to take all things, even our mistakes and our failures, and redeem it. But I said, Lori, it's clearance to land. See, we've been praying for two years. Put us in a city where we don't know anyone. Put us in a city where there's a desire to change the world. And then thirdly, put us in a city that we've never been to before. And so I say this to Lori. I said, Lori, it is Austin. Never been there before. We'd never even talked about it. And phone went quiet there for a few seconds, thinking, well, there goes the marriage. And she said, Joe, The same thing happened to me this morning. I'm reading my Bible, and all of a sudden, it just dropped. It is Austin. Simultaneously. Separate, but yet simultaneously. We would find ourselves moving to Austin, landing there August the 10th, and we began the church on October the 1st, 40 days later. That's why we helped start ARC, because you can do it the hard way or the ARC way. And which was really cool, Chris was going to Birmingham. I should have gone to Birmingham. We should have all gone to Birmingham. So Chris, he leaves Baton Rouge, goes to Birmingham. Rick Bazette, he leaves and goes to Little Rock. I go to Austin. You've got Stovall Weems, just a lot of our world and friendships that many of you guys would know. It was funny, like most of the lead team, we were all in Baton Rouge together in the mid-'80s and until the '90s, and then 2000, we were just kind of scattered. And so we arrive, and we started the church 40 days later because we needed an offering, right? That was the only reason why we started the church. We need an offering. How many would agree? I mean, when you're doing this for a living, you need an offering, right? You really can't do that in a small group. So we need to become official. And so we started the church on October the 1st. We had 54 people. And so about 48 of those people were from New Orleans that came to be with us that day in the Baton Rouge area. And it got down to about 7 people. And we were in a Round Rock, it's called the Round Rock, little suburb of Austin. And the Round Rock Library, public library, 2 rooms, adults and children. And so Lori and I would lead worship. She'd play the keyboard. The kids were by themselves. And then she would finish playing, and then she would walk and then go into the room, and she would do the children's ministry. And then when I got ready to close the service, I would bang on the partition. It was a partition. It wasn't even a real wall. It was just an accordion partition, and I'd bang, and then she'd leave the kids and then come over and get on the keyboard, and we would close the 3-hour service, which was amazing. It was like this for about 3 years, to be honest with you. It was hell. And one Sunday, Lori and I were leading worship, and I think we're up to about, at this time, maybe 55 people, and all different 55 people. And we looked at each other, and she's playing keyboard, and I'm singing, and I said to her, Lori, we're outnumbered today. I mean, how many, when you look out in the audience, they're just looking at you like, we don't even want to be here. And I stopped in the middle of the message, as God is my witness. And that day, I was trying to also preach by fill in the blanks, because Chris is doing fill in the blanks, and everything at Highlands is working, and so I went ahead and tried to start doing fill in the blanks, and I couldn't find the blank. I couldn't find the sentence. And I just stopped, and I said, this is the worst thinking message I have ever heard in my life, and I'm preaching it. And I said, and I don't blame you if you don't come back to this place. I wouldn't come back to this place. And Lori looks at me, and she said, let me just say, you say that one more time, I will never come back to this place as well. And so we grew to about 70 people in that little library, and then we went to a hotel conference room center, Battle of the Bands. It would be a conference center where there was 4 main conference rooms, and you would have 4 churches meeting at the same time with partitions dividing the 4 services simultaneously happening. And you would walk into one lobby, and you'd have 4 representatives from 4 churches out there going, this is the church you want to go to. And then somebody else would say, no, this is the church. Or they'd come out of the bad church trying to do fill in the blanks, and then they'd go into the other church. And then you would just, and you could tell like some people thought that was this church and it wasn't the right church. And then we'd try to coordinate how to close at the same time so that when you were trying to land the plane and give people a God moment, you didn't want the drums right 18 inches away from your podium to just begin to kick in. And so that was another wonderful year in that building. And then we got into a 6,000 square foot industrial plex. And just a storefront, 6,000 square feet, one door, in and out. You walk in and you're in the sanctuary. And then you walk a little bit past the sanctuary into the kids area. And again, 6,000 square feet. And we grew to almost 2,000 people in that one room. Now, this leads me to where I want to go. And of course, the rest of the story's been cool, and just to watch what God's been doing in campuses and where we are now in the inner city of Austin. We're in a fight. I can't say too much. I was doing some actually interview with Fox News yesterday. We just pray that it's not going to go to this level, but there's a potential that they are trying to, and they hope that, as Texas has always led the way, sadly in bad ways. When you look at prayer coming out of school, started in Austin, Texas. Roe versus Wade. It was a Texas-Austin relationship there. It's a bed of bad. It's a very dark city in many ways. And what they are now trying to do, even though there are 75 churches meeting in Austin Independent School District campuses and facilities, for some reason they have picked us, as we're in a very nice new amphitheater. It's about a $100 million complex. And even though what's on our website is not even as controversial as other churches, they have just said, we're taking you down and we're going to get you out. And so we've had Antifa groups, we've had every kind of major protesting that has been showing up for the last several weeks. Of course, we had, and we are seeing a tremendous response. We had almost 800 people our very first Sunday there down by UT. But this thing is ramping up. They know my kids' names. When my son walked out, who goes to Highland College, he was there for the weekend for the launch. He just walked out. He's 18. He just walked out. And then you've got about almost 100 protesters. Again, Antifa's there, communistic groups, LGBTQ, all these. And, of course, there's dozens of police officers there because it's been picked up now in the news, and it's just kind of fueling a mob mentality. So Jackson walks out, and all of a sudden the guy on the megaphone goes, "There's the pastor's son. There's Connor Champion. F you, Connor." Well, Jackson is standing there, and he goes, "I'm not Connor. I'm Jackson." And so he runs in, and he goes, "Connor, they're effing you. Get out here." And actually, they kind of enjoy it. And so it's been hardcore. It's been hardcore. And as it gets to this place, and as it is in Austin, I don't think, guys, this is going to just be an Austin situation. Get ready in every church plant in America. Get ready in every place that you go with the gospel. It's going to fuel. It's going to fuel a fire, God's fire or the world's fire. And the reality is we need to have this mindset. This is where I want to go today. Exodus 33, I changed my notes. In fact, they don't even have these notes. I told the team I'm not going to preach as Pastor Dwayne was preaching this morning. I just got a burden just because of some things that you launched from. You mentioned it about if we don't have the presence of God. And I really want to just talk about in this moment about what we have found in the last, if you will, 18 to 20 years in our church culture, in our church planting culture, in all of our churches, there has been rightfully so, and I would say even from the mid-90s on. In fact, I leave immediately after our last session here, and I go to be with Dr. John Maxwell. John and I are very close friends. Chris, myself, we do a lot with him, and so I'm going to go and hang out with him tonight and tomorrow, and I think John has a lot to do with this, and I say this in a positive way, that we needed the principles of leadership. And the churches began to adopt the principles of leadership, rightfully so. In fact, God would give John the platform. That I really do believe that so much of the success of church planting and what we see in ARC and what you guys are seeing in LINC and what you're seeing in your existing churches or even rebranding of your churches is that there needed to be principle-driven leadership. But the reality is that I think if we're not careful, we have, and I think we can shift too far to where we leave the principles and we've left the presence. And I just want to talk about being a presence-driven leader. And because what we're in now in Austin, principles are not going to solve this situation. This is a spiritual battle. This is a warfare. This is beyond us. This is not going to be the right talking points. This is not going to be held by some great marketer or handled by someone who can give us great communication. But really, this is going to take the Spirit of God. And that was part of our plan even when we came to Austin, or even before it was Austin. It was, God, you tell us where to go, because I want to be able to say I am there because I heard from you. Jesus said, where I am, there you'll be also. I want to be able to say that I am there because of him. And ministry does flow out of this. I wasn't raised in church. I got saved. I really do believe I was saved at 14, but then my dad, as an NFL football coach, we were not for long in any city. NFL stands for that. And we were moving all over around the U.S., Canada. I was born in Canada. And church was never a part of our world. Sunday mornings we were in football stadiums. And then I would attend First Baptist Church of Natchez, Mississippi when my dad retired, just north of Baton Rouge. And then I go to LSU, and then I have an encounter with Christ. And then I get plugged into a church led at that time, of course, still is, by Pastor Jimmy Swaggart and Family Worship Center. And I was told, because of even the men that were there and the people that were discipling me, it was wonderful. It was awesome. Glenn Berteau and some of these guys, many of you guys would know that Donnie Moore, Denny Duran, all those worlds, so much of my world was framed from that season at Family Worship Center in Baton Rouge. And of course, you know the rest of the story. But I was told that, Joe, if you're going to be in the ministry, this is what you need to do. You need to get about 5 good messages. You need to get those down to these points. And you just need to learn how to shoot these 5 bullets, and then we're gonna help you get your resume together, and we're gonna help you get marketed, and so that you can get in the ministry. And I went, in my spirit, if that's the ministry, if that's the principle, if it's not your presence that doesn't lead me into this, I don't want that. You know, they came to Jesus and they said, we want to do the work of the ministry. In John 5, they said, we want to do the work of the ministry. And this is the verse that totally, just literally to this day has defined me. Jesus looked at him and he said, to know me is the work of the ministry. That's what Jesus said. To know me, to walk with me. That word know is the same Adam knew Eve. It's you know me and you will have ministry. You stop walking with me, you stop walking in my presence, you won't have ministry. Now, you may have the world's ministry. You may have, if you will, the principles of ministry. But guys, we're not carriers of principles only. We're carriers of his presence. You know, the Bible says in Ephesians, and God gave gifts, and he gave what? He gave men. He gave the apostle, the prophet, the teacher, the evangelist, and the pastor. I want you to hear what he says right there. God gave gifts, and he gave a prophet. He doesn't say, and he gave prophesying. It doesn't say, and he gave teaching. It doesn't say he gave evangelism. It doesn't say he gave apostolizing or pastoring. He gave the man. He gave the man. The apostle is the gift who prophesies. The teacher is the gift. See, this is where many of us get off track, and I got off track. And that is, I began to think, well, if I just give them good teaching, they don't have to have a good teacher, and you can give them great teaching, but if the teacher is not a good person, if the person that you are and the person that you're supposed to be doesn't match your teaching, if the teacher and the teaching are not the same, you're not fulfilling the call of God upon your life. See, he gave, this changed me. In other words, you're the gift to the body. So you can go to you can Google and you can iTube or YouTube or whatever tube you want to do. You can, in fact, I wrote it as Pastor Dwayne was speaking. You can Google and you can YouTube techniques and principles, but you cannot Google and you cannot YouTube his presence. You just can't do that. And principles, in fact, there are situations in your churches and my churches and ministries that principles will and can solve. Most of my world was framed after Family Worship Center and being a part of that, just as more as a spectator, and then beginning to fellowship with men and the people that would shape my world and my life, my pastors I would meet in these size rooms right here with pastor fellowships. Many of you would probably know the guys that I'm involved with and my mentors. And what we did talk a lot about then back in the day was presence. There were amazing, rich messages, but yet the churches were all floundering. The churches were all struggling. That they had great revelation on the platform, but when it came to their churches making impact in their cities, it just wasn't happening. And that's why I think God began to go, guys, we got to get this together. But what I did learn out of that moment is that, and if we're not careful, we begin to think, okay, if I get these 10 messages, if I can get these 10 principles, if I can get these 7 techniques, these 7 ways, these 7 growth barriers, guys, if we are thinking if that's gonna move the kingdom of darkness, I think we're gonna be found lacking. I think that the enemy has a field day. So I say it like this: there are principles that you and I need that will solve issues and challenges in our churches. There are principles. In fact, you don't need to hear the presence of God. You don't have to have the presence of God. Remember when Joshua was praying about, God, we just got our butts kicked by AI. In other words, we had a bad service. You ever had a bad service? Anybody had a bad service? Remember when Joshua, he goes, guys, we got this. Go out there and let's just get this. We can get this. I just got this off of YouTube. Rick Warren just preached a how-to message like never before. And, or whoever you want to, he goes, we got this. This is going to be awesome. And what happened when they go face the smallest of the cities? They're killed. They're routed. This was a flop. He hits his face. Joshua's like, oh, God, what's up? Why have you left us? And the Lord says, stop praying. That's probably the only time I can find in the scriptures where God says, get off your face. I don't want to hear a prayer. This is nothing to pray about. Go do what you know you're supposed to do. There's an issue in your staff. There's an issue on the team. It doesn't take the presence of God to go handle that toxic situation. And of course, we know it was Achan. And he had to go deal with Achan. That doesn't take great revelation. That just took obedience. That's just common sense. But there are some problems that you will not solve by principles. It's going to take the presence of God. Yes. And that's why Moses would say, Lord, if your presence does not go with us, do not what? Do not lead me from here. Think about it. If your presence is not with me, God, I can't lead. And so I just want to talk about leading from the presence. Yes. Leading from the life that you and I are supposed to steward first before we steward the church and steward our ministry. We got to steward our relationship to God. And when you steward that properly, when you are careful to maintain your walk with Christ in the Word and in prayer and in holiness and in righteousness, and when you are walking out of that to say, God, it's not my will, but your will be done. I can promise you, whether you're in a storefront or a hotel conference center or a library, listen, Joseph and Mary, when they were chosen by God to bring their son Jesus, his son Jesus, into the world, when God said, out of Joseph and Mary will come my answer to the world, when you and I are birthing the adequate or preaching the adequate and accurate Christ, God's going to send the wise men to move you out of that small place into the world. See, I've always said, Lord, I want your backing. I want your approval. I want your hand. And so with that, when it comes to being a presence-driven leader and making sure that we maintain a living relationship to Christ, not to Christianity. Jesus did not come to set up Christianity. He did not come to bring Christianity. He came to bring us himself. He didn't come to set up religion. That was always the issue, whether it was with Israel in the Old Testament or his new Israel in the New Testament. It is that we want to take these principles and make it a religion. He didn't come to make a religion. He didn't come to make another way. What did he say? Me. I'm the way. I'm the focus. I'm the attention. But Joe, if you really want to be in ministry, and I went, if that's the ministry, I don't want it. I want you, God. But I don't want to be a part of that. I want God, the focus, to be you. And then yet, out of that comes, and out of that relationship, out of that presence, out of walking out of his presence, I think that's when things begin to change and things can begin to happen. And Moses, of course, was trained. He was schooled. He was educated. In fact, when we say Moses was a stutterer, that's true. But let me tell you, read in the book of Acts. Moses, eloquent in speech and in words. He was lying when he was stuttering. That's my opinion. It says in Acts 7, Moses, eloquent in words and in speech. I think he went, okay, oh, stop. You are, just shut up. Just do what you're. And here he is, coming out of the greatest of all universities, the world. And he says, God, I know one thing, to handle the pharaohs and to handle the darkness and to handle Egypt and to handle these millions of people that you're giving to me, I got to have more than just another principle. I got to have just another more than how to break growth barriers. And you should know those principles. Please do not say, well, all I need is the presence of God. That's what I thought in 2000. All I need is the presence of the Lord. It's just, in fact, more presence, more growth. Let's go to 4 hours. And really, we started our church with doing 3-hour services. Hour of worship with a woman who could barely play the keyboard with flappy arms and me. I'm teasing. In a suit that was just ridiculous, olive green, that a family in Louisiana bought so that I could preach their father's funeral. Standing up there. More presence. Knowing God says, get off your face. You need some help. You need to cut your service back. You need to change what you're doing. You need to stop all that. Even God says, I'm done with your presence. I'm done with your singing. I left a long time ago. And so I had a problem. But now I would say, and I think this is where we are as a church. I think that, and I say this, Big C Church, I think for those that are thinking about planting, for those that are thinking about rebranding or moving or relocating or actually planting another campus, you better make sure, and I think this is where I hope maybe you'll get some revelation that the hand of God is the one that is moving your hands. We don't want to be found with our hands only on it. We want to be able to say, God, your hand was on it. Co-laboring. When Gideon had, of course, the call to go battle, and there God, in front of him, he's got 30,000 people. And the Lord said, no, it's too many people. And he reduces it down to what? To 300 people. He brings it down from this massive, large gathering to just a small group of men. And you know what the reason was, is that Gideon, those 300 men know your presence, but the 30 to 40,000 men, they don't know your presence. Yeah, there's some other principles that God was teaching them. He goes, but I got to have presence-driven men. So with that, here's the story I want to use as a backdrop and give you a couple principles before we go. The Bible says in Acts chapter 16, there came a crowd that rose up against them. The crowd rose up. Listen, that can be a positive crowd, that can be a negative crowd, but all of a sudden you got a crowd. And it can feel like you're going to get overwhelmed in the crowd. We just built a 3,000 new sanctuary, 3,000 seat sanctuary, and now we got new crowds of people showing up. And this thing is coming at us. And it says, and the chief magistrates, this is Acts 16:22, and the magistrates are now upset at Paul and Silas, and of course they tear their robes off and begin to beat them, and with many blows they throw them into the prison and command them to be put into the jail securely. And the Bible says that they were thrown into the inner prison, fastened their feet in stocks, but about midnight, Paul and Silas were Googling and YouTubing 19 ways to get out of prison, or 19 ways to break this barrier. And they began to pray and they began to sing. to God. And the prisoners were listening to them. And suddenly there came an earthquake, so that the foundations of the prison house were shaken. And immediately all those doors were opened, the chains were unfastened, the jailers awoke, drew his sword. He was about to kill himself. And Paul cried out, "Do yourself no harm. We're here. We're not going anywhere." And he called for lights, and trembling with fear, fell down before Paul and Silas and said, "What must I do to be saved, sir?" Presence-driven leaders, you can put it like this. Presence-driven leaders, number one, are fueled. They're fueled by the fire. At midnight, Paul and Silas are worshiping. At midnight. In other words, they can't sleep. I don't think they can't sleep because of fear. I think they can't sleep because of excitement. They are fired up by what they're seeing happen in this particular situation. Acts 19, there'd be another situation in Ephesus. The whole city would be stirred up against them. And I just believe that when you're presence-driven, you're not afraid of the fire. You're not afraid of the pressure. You're not afraid of the trials. Yeah, nobody likes, like I did. I remember in 2008, we had 23 staff changes in 15 months. It was a glorious situation. And I don't have time to go into all the various details, but let me just say it was an ugly time. You know, when people are leaving you, 23 staff in just a relatively short amount of time makes the sheep say to themselves, "I think we should be leaving also." And no one goes to an empty restaurant. When you know you're in there and you're the only one in there, and you're like, "I don't think I should be here also." That's what sheep do. They'll see somebody that they have been pastored by or been led by, and off they go. And that's what we're oftentimes afraid of. When all of a sudden you got a fire of a staff change or a transition or a crisis, or you, like Joshua, have to deal with an Achan, and we become conflict avoiders. We become, to a fault, like Jeremiah, you go around saying, "Peace, peace, it's okay," and it's not okay. You got dysfunction. You know, I say to my staff, if you are avoiding me and I'm avoiding you, you better figure out while you are avoiding me. And let me just say, if you're avoiding me, when you hear me coming down the hall and you're avoiding me, I know you're avoiding me. We better figure that out, because I'm not going to be held captive. I was held captive until 2008, when the church began to grow from about 3 to 2008, and that 6,000 square foot facility, which took the presence of God to make that happen. We had 333 seats in that little sanctuary. We say it like this: everybody flew first class at Celebration Church, because you were only one row away from it, and it was just right here. And when you begin to see these kind of transition, when you begin to see this kind of fire come against you, when all of a sudden, like, in fact, I'll dare you to Google me right now. Put my name up there and put bigot. Don't do it. I'm just going to tell you that's what's going to pop up. And we're not. There's nothing. We haven't said anything. In fact, we're we love everybody. Whosoever will let them come. But all of a sudden, this fire is going to come. Just because you believe in the Scriptures. But more than that, because of the presence of God, the anointing of God. And let me ask you a question. How do you handle when you find yourself like Paul and Silas? Are you fueled by that fire? At midnight, they can't sleep. They're caffeinated on this. I'm not saying that you are to enjoy conflict or that you are to relish hardship or radical changes and staff changes and decreases and money issues. Please, we rebuke that in Jesus' name. But let me say it like this. The Bible tells us and this is God's method, in 1 Chronicles chapter 26. 1 Chronicles 26, you can look this up on your own, verse 27. The Bible says they dedicated part of the spoil won in battles to repair the house of the Lord. There is no building without a battle. They took from the battle the spoil to dedicate dedicate for the repairing of the house of God. You don't get beautiful without a fire. You don't become what God. In fact, it doesn't say they added to the sanctuary with the spoil that they won in battle. It says they became more beautiful. The sanctuary became beautified. It became upgraded. They didn't add square footage, but they added the glory of God in it. They added the weight of God. You know what glory means? I know Dwayne knows it because he preached on Job for 40 stinking hours in Mexico. Anybody that can preach 40 hours in Mexico on Job knows everything in the Bible. And he's read 120 times through it. I'm halfway in my first reading. And so I went to LSU on a football scholarship. Is that okay? So, but I've listened to it on audio 9,000 times. So, the word glory means weight. You understand? That's what it means, weight. God does not count your success, He weighs it. If you get nothing else out of me, which is probably the only thing you'll get right there, He does not count, He weighs. You know, you can put some people on the scale of Christ, and they weigh about 17 ounces. And then you can put some people on the scale of Christ, and they look like they would weigh 17 ounces, but they weigh 1,700 pounds worth of weight. I've been with some frail, broken people. Broken, frail, nothing in the form of their presence. Maybe their age, maybe their life, maybe their handicap, their problems. But when you start talking to them about Jesus, there's weight behind it. There's a measure of heaviness. It's okay to sometimes be in the presence of God where we just don't always have to feel so great about ourselves. It's okay to have to go to some battles when you go, God, I am nothing. And that's why Paul says, it seems as though God considers us apostles, leaders, last. For what reason? Why does He put us last? It goes with it, guys. It goes with the anointing. It goes with being an apostle, a pastor. It goes with being a leader. It goes with being a carrier, because he's got to have carriers, or he's got to have carriages that can handle more weight. And I think that's what Paul and Silas were able to do. What are you doing worshiping at midnight? What are you doing worshiping and singing praises to God? And I think like Peter, he says, guys, don't be surprised at the fiery ordeal that's come upon you as though this is something bad or something strange. It's so that you would go to another level, another degree. He says, to the degree that you are sharing in the sufferings of Christ, just continue to rejoice that there's going to come the revelation of His glory. That there's going to come a revelation. Listen, when you find yourself dealing with fire, He is going to be faithful to fuel you with His glory. Have you been mistreated? Have you been misaligned? Or you've been attacked? You've been accused? You've been outed by whoever, but there's nothing to out? You're just going to have to go, God, this just means you're about to do something great in my life. This just means you're about to do something. One particular story, early on in our church days, because we didn't have enough money to buy the keyboard, there was a guy that bought our keyboard. I think he was from Michigan. And I think it was actually another state. He bought the keyboard, and then we were playing the keyboard one Sunday. He goes, I want to sing a special today. And it's Sunday morning. And he goes, if I don't sing today, God's my witness. At that time, he had bought the keyboard, and his wife was also now playing the keyboard, right? How many know there's strings attached to whatever people give? Sometimes. And he goes, if you don't let me sing, you see my keyboard up there? We're 10 minutes away from service starting. He goes, this is why you need to plant with LINC. Because we didn't have any money. So he goes, if I don't sing today, I said, what about Wednesday? The guy can't sing. He goes, oh, you saying I'm not good enough? I have to wait till Wednesday? I said, just wait till Wednesday. I'm doing everything I can to keep the guy. And I said, but you're not singing today. And he goes, then we're leaving. And he walks up and he said, honey, you grab one end and I'll grab the other. And they walked out with their keyboard. We're like, you want the stand? Can we keep the stand? You know, we're like, anyway, so. And then he stands out. This is at the conference room. He stands out there telling everybody, don't go into that church. And I guess we're about a little over 100, 120 people at this time. He's like, let me just tell you, this is an evil man. This is a bad man. And of course, as all that's going down, and we just start, whatever guitar player we had, and Lori, her flappy arms, as we begin to, I'm sorry, Dwayne, I'm just going to run on it. Anyway, so my wife's as thin as his wife. So with that being said, I see this couple come in the back, 3 boys. And anyway, we get through the service, and I preach and meet this guy. Fast forward. A year later, they're still in our church. They're being relocated, very financially secure and successful. And they go, the Lord told us to give you our house. They deeded us. They gave us, it was a $450,000 home. They paid the taxes on it. They gave us the house, and they said, you can sell it tomorrow. God spoke to us. This is your home. When keyboards are walking out, houses are walking out. Okay? I'm just telling. Now, I've had people say, well, I've been tithing and I didn't get a house. I said, no, that doesn't come from tithing. You got to sacrifice blood. Okay? It ain't 10%. He's a rewarder of those who what? Diligently seek him. Number 2, I think that we can learn people that are presence-driven leaders and as well as principles, but just from the story of Paul and Silas, what you have is that Paul and Silas were worshiping. Number 2, they understand the power of a team. You can't walk in God's presence and not be in relationship to people. This is 1 John. You just can't say, I love God, but I don't want people, or I love God, but I'm not going to be in relationship to people, or I'm going to build this church by God's presence. And I know a lot of pastors, they got great preaching, but boy, are they terrible in their relational skills. They're terrible in how they do life with people. I think a lot of pastors don't want people to get too close to them because they're going to be found out as to what kind of people they really are. You know, when Daniel found out that he had an issue, and when Daniel was about to potentially die, and along with every wise and gifted leader in that country at that time, you know the story, he said, give me some time. And the first thing that Daniel did is he went to the house, and he got his friends Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah together. And he goes, guys, we need to be praying together. We need to be handling this situation together. What kind of team builder are you? What kind of person are you when it comes to recognizing that you can't do this alone? And I do believe that we've got to be very careful that we don't step on people to step up in our ministry. That we are not using people, overlooking people to get to the next level. Or we look at people as our pawns, our subjects, our servants, our taxpayers to finance us in our kingdoms. I had a relatively large, well-known pastor friend that the ministry had gone through a major transition. And again, I could probably name the ministry and name the person. Don't try to figure it out. And he goes, Joe, I want to be in your inner circle. He was now looking for a new circle. And I'm walking through the congregation. In fact, it was the first building we built. And I'm like, you want to be in the inner circle? Here it is. No, he goes, I want to be in the green room. I said, I have no green room. Not against that, and I have a place to get away. I get all that, but this is it. You can't do this. Why would I want to do you? If you don't like, these are my people. This is why we do what we do. Don't ever begin to violate principles over people. Don't allow you got to be very careful of how you handle God's people. And as Pastor Dwayne was saying, when Moses lost his temper, you know what God said? He didn't just say because you lost your temper. He says you lost your temper in the presence of the people. In my opinion, that's the stress is Moses. Hey, I could have worked with you by yourself. But you stood up on that platform and you crushed the people. You did this in front of the people. How do you handle people? Are you sensitive to people? Are you aware of people? And let's not forget J.I. Packer, great theologian. He wrote a book called God, the Great Humanist. And if there's anybody that's humanistic, it's God. Now, when I say humanistic, in other words, didn't he die for humans? He became a human. And he was a human at every one of our levels, from the stable to the grave. He went and walked in all of our humanity so that he could be what? Merciful and kind and gracious and sympathetic. And I just think that in that second principle, you just find how Paul and Silas, Lori and I, there was a day, and there's been seasons in our ministry for 30 years where it got tough. And I've seen a lot of church planters, I've seen a lot of pastors. The congregation doesn't know it, but they are spiritually not together at home. They are together on the platform, but they are not together in the bedroom. And they do not want anyone to see, of course, what's really going on. And I said to Lori, we're not going to lose our marriage trying to plant a church or lead a church. And if we lose our marriage doing church, we have lost everything. God would rather us not be in the ministry, but to be married and hold to the covenant expression of God's nature to the world, which was ordained to be primarily preached through covenant marriage. It's the gospel according to marriage. And if we don't understand that, if we don't, remember Malachi, he goes, I got something against you. He goes, what is it? He goes, you treat roughly. You're rough with your wife of your youth. And I think we can broaden that context and go, you may be like these priests in Malachi. You're rough when you're handling people. It's just doesn't the way. There's the fastest way. Jacob's one of our executive team members. And if you really want to know what anything does for the good at Celebration Church, ask Jacob. I'm the looks, he's the brains. And no, he's everything. Fastest way we tell people you want an exit out of Celebration staff is to be what? To be mean to people. That's it. I'll work with you. You can kill people, but don't be mean to people. True story, my brother's a 2-star general, just retired. Most decorated National Guardsman as a commanding officer in the history of our country. So no one has, you can thank him later. Yeah, he doesn't care. Anyway, so this is my time. Just stop all that. So Greg joined the Guard in college at Ole Miss and then just continued for 40 years and got his law degree primarily in the oil and gas industry. But just stayed in the Guard and just became this prolific leader. And when, of course, today happened, 9/11 happened, that just propelled Greg into the world of Afghanistan. He commanded Afghanistan and Bagram and Southcom. And anyway, with all that being said, my brother came to say, after he retired, or just before he retired, he goes, Joe, I got to come to Texas, Camp Mabry, the National Guard headquarters. They had just deployed back, and he goes, I need to meet. Can I stay at the house? I said, sure, come on. And so Greg, he spends the night, he and Gail. Next morning, he goes to Mabry. I go to work. I go to my son's T-ball game. And my son's T-ball coach, who's in the Guard, he's full-time Guard, he goes, your brother, do you know he's in town? I said, yeah, he stayed with us last night. He goes, do you know why he's in town? I said, no. Other than I know that he had business at Mabry. Oh, he goes, yeah, there's business at Mabry. He's got the whole base shut down. I said, for what? He says, well, when your brother was commanding Bagram in Afghanistan, there was what he thought was a relationship going on between a female officer and a male enlistee. And he knew that they were both married and they had their kids. And he said, but he knew something was going on between these two, which is against the law in the military. It's adultery. And he brought them in, and they said nothing's going on. And then he brought in us, and what people said, and everybody, whether they knew it or not, were covering for the guy. Well, as soon as they get back to Texas, deployed back home, within weeks, they have both left their spouses and they're living together. They'd left their kids and their wives and husband, and now they're living together, and Greg found out. He now shuts down this base at Mabry to bring everybody that covered and brought this couple in. And this is a 25-year career. He got their careers. He tried to get them court-martialed. He said, but all I could do was get their career and get their benefits. He says, because when you handle people like they handled people, when you mishandle, and in fact, he looked at me and said, if you ever mishandle your wife, you die that day to me, Joe. He goes, I'll work with you if you kill somebody. He says, but don't mishandle people. This is military. This is not church. This is military. How much more? How much greater should we value people, especially our own spouses? Well, I'm under pressure. Who cares? You need to get under his presence. Number 3, presence-driven leaders can't be hidden. I love this thought that Paul and Silas singing at midnight, and what were the prisoners doing? They weren't sleeping. They were what? They were listening. The prisoners are now in charge. You got Paul and Silas. Did I say prisoners earlier? It's Paul and Silas, the prisoners. They are worshiping. They are singing. And now the guard is what I meant to say. Now the guards are doing what? They're listening to Paul and Silas. There's a reverse. Let me tell you what the presence of God does. It turns the fight around. It reverses everything. So now Paul and Silas are in control of the jail. And here's now these jailers, these guards are having to listen to Paul and Silas. And that's why I think that when you and I are presence-driven, it allows you and I to never remain hidden. God's going to get you where you need to be. God's going to place you, he's going to place in front of you what needs to be. I said, and I'll use this as an illustration, I said one Sunday, and Bobby's been on our property, I said one Sunday we're going to have 100 acres on I-35. I didn't know how it's going to happen. We were only a couple hundred people at the time. I said, but 100 acres is what the Lord just dropped in my heart. I was preaching. And my wife's on the front row going, just stop this. And I said, 100 acres on I-35. After the service, she goes, why'd you say that? I said, I don't know, but it sounds really good. And I'm in his presence. Well, a couple in our church, Ray and Maria, they said, Pastor Joe, God told us while you were preaching, and when you said that, we asked the Lord to use us to find the hill, to find a piece of property. And they came back and they said, we found a piece of property. I said, is it for sale? And they go, no, but the Lord gave us a vision. While driving down the interstate, an open vision, we saw a building up on top of this hill. And I'm like, that's great. They had just left the Lutheran church. This was all new to them. Basically Dutchess. And so they went for months. And they finally said, we're going to go knock on the door of this house. And I said, go for it. I never went to this property. And they went and knocked on the door and told them who they were. And they had called and asked for permission. I said, yeah, go for it. And they called me and said, Joe, they want to meet with you. So I went over there and I said, what's the story? They said, when we knocked on the door, the man said, who are you people? And they said, well, we're not Jehovah's Witnesses, but sort of. We're believing God for 100, our pastor is believing God for 100 acres, and my wife and I saw a vision that we saw on this hill, a church. And he said, who told you? How do you know? And so here's the story. I would go the next day. The story is in 1942, Mr. Barton bought this property, dedicated it to God. And he says, I see 3 things on this hill. It's 165 acres. He said there will be a church, there will be a school, and there will be something that will heal the nations in the form of a hospital or some kind of health-related ministry. 1942. He died 14 years prior to this now that I'm telling you. We had a prayer meeting in this room just the day before for the first time in 60 years to ask God what to do with this property. You're knocking on our door today telling us you saw a church or that there's interest in this building, this property. We just prayed and said, God, show us what church we're supposed to have on this hill. This is David Barton's grandfather, wall builders. David Barton grew up on this property. David Barton will tell you he used to watch his grandfather walk this property daily, saying, God, send the nations to this hill. I told him our story. Now I'm meeting with David's aunt and his dad, Grady. They've both gone on to be with the Lord. I told them the vision. They said, we have 110 acres to sell. And they said, how much money do you have? I said, I have nothing. I had nothing, but I had his presence. And if this is already what's going down, I'm not worried about the money. And then guess what? They sold us 110 acres for $22,000 an acre, $2.4 million. It's now worth, I don't know, they say $40 million. We're sitting now, Austin is driving right by us. You will not stay hidden if you'll hide yourself in the presence of God. Your church will not stay hidden. I'm not saying throw out principles. I'm just telling you. Remember with David, the little guy, Saul was having his issues. And they go, Saul, we got to get you some help, man. And they go, well, one man steps up. I've seen a young man, 1 Samuel 16, the son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite. This guy is amazing. He's skilled in worship. It goes on to say he was not just a skillful musician, but a man of valor, a warrior, prudent in speech, handsome man, and the Lord is with him. You can't hide a man who makes sure that he stays first and foremost in love with God's presence. And then number 4, passionate about people. Passionate about people. And I've already covered the people aspect, but I want you to see this. When the jailer, who probably could have been, when that guard was about to kill himself, what did Paul and Silas say to the man that was about to draw a sword on his own body? Don't do yourself any harm. When we found out that the protesters were going to come by the hundreds, you can ask Jacob, we sent food trucks to feed them during their protest. And Austin has a bunch of food trucks, and of course our people were happy too. And we said to them, this is for you. It's on us. Eat all you want. They accused us of blocking the highway so that people would not see their. In fact, it was on the other side, but still, nevertheless, no matter what you do, we didn't say, we're going to poison you. We didn't say, yeah, we laced these tacos. We said, we want to bless you. In fact, where the decrease of the rage is that they said, you guys won't scream at us. We don't like protesting against people that are non-screamers. You guys are not yelling at us. You guys don't hate us. That's, of course we don't. There's nothing we've ever said. We're not anti. In fact, we have people like all of our churches. They come from every walk, and they're coming from every situation, every background, every race, whatever. We're a church that welcomes everybody. But we can't change what the Bible does tell us to believe when it comes to the context of marriage and sexuality as it's defined by the Scripture. That's all. But we can't move that. I can't change that. But we're not mad at you. We don't hate you. In fact, we've all, as Paul even talks about in 1 Corinthians 6, hey, he doesn't just mention one sin. He mentions a lot of different issues going on in there. And so we've made sure that we say to people, don't do yourself any harm. We got to be careful of having a rage against people or a hate against people that have actually maybe, and probably were the ones that have hurt us. The difference between ministry today, for me, and 30 years ago, coming into this, I was telling Pastor Bobby this morning, is my memory is a lot shorter than it used to be. I used to carry hurts and grievances for a while. Now it's like, I ain't got time for that. Lori sometimes will go, you went over and said hello to him? And I said, yeah, aren't they in our church? She goes, no, those were the people that tried to kill us. A woman remembers. I'm just going to say that. Number 5, and I'm almost done. Here's the last one. Presence-driven leaders finish what they start. Leave, Paul. Leave, Silas. Just get on out. Because they now know these people have the presence of God on them. I mean, when you have strategic earthquakes, setting people free and chains coming exactly off where they need to come off, and they now like, hey, we had a little meeting, and we would like you to leave in peace. They like, no more earthquakes, okay? Because we know your God can do some pretty supernatural things. And Paul says, you guys beat us in public. No trial. We're Romans, by the way. You threw us into prison, and now you want to, what? You want to ask us to leave secretly? No, indeed. We're going to stay. And the Bible tells us Paul stayed a couple more days preaching because he knew that there was chicken on that bone. He needed to keep working. And you can begin to come, Pastor Bobby. You mentioned Samson, Brother Dwayne. I believe it's correct. In the life of Samson, this is to me the scariest, maybe one of the scariest verses in the Bible. It says in Judges 13:4, I believe it is, Samuel would begin to deliver Israel. God said about Samuel, he wouldn't finish. He would only begin. I think that's right. Does anybody have that? He would begin to deliver. Let me ask you a question. Are you just going to be a beginner? I'm just going to start, but I'm not going to finish? Listen, can we make up our minds? That which he has called us to walk out, that which he has called us to, we're going to finish the course. We're going to finish the race. With every head bowed and every eye closed all over this place as we just pray. Father, we're going to say like Moses, we need your presence. Our world needs your presence. And without your presence, Lord, we say like Moses, don't lead us anywhere else. I can't do it without you. I can't handle it. I can't handle another person. I can't handle another issue. But in you, with your hand on me, I can handle it. With the hand of God, I can handle it. And so, Lord, would you just coat us now in your presence? Would you just fill us with your presence? I thank you for this amazing body of people who are blessings to so many. We love you and we thank you. In Jesus' name, amen. I went over, but I went by the clock that they had. This might have been the last time ever here. Oh, the sixth point is presence-driven leaders preach longer than principle-driven leaders. Okay.
Well, so, Joe, I need to inform you of something that I probably should have informed you of before you got up here, and that is that we work for Dwayne Vander Clock. He is known as the Clock. Everybody give it up for Joe. Come on. That's a good word.